Anxiety is a liar, but right now it's a very loud one, and it's screaming at over 300 million people globally every day. Here in Australia, 1 in 5 had some sort of a mental struggle last year, and anxiety is the most common one we face. But it's not just our adults that's getting affected. Nearly half of our children have reported some form of anxiety or stress. This isn't just feeling a little bit stressed. We're in an epidemic. So today on the Feck No More podcast, we're moving from the what ifs to the how to's. We're going to look at a few reasons why anxiety is becoming more and more common. We're also going to look at how we can overcome anxiety and what has worked for other people and what the studies and the research are showing.
Failure is like everything else in life, it's just a win.
Never fail.
I need to know to get to where I want to go.
But before we jump into it, I just really want to thank everybody for tuning in, for all their support. It does blow my mind. Remember why we're here. We're here to say, feck it, no more. And if you're suffering with anxiety at the moment, or you have done in the past, or you know somebody that is currently going through a similar thing, please share the podcast with them so that they can understand a little bit more about anxiety. They're not on their own. So many other people suffer with it. And also what's working for people to overcome anxiety. And again, lastly, I really do appreciate every single one of you out there. We should come up with a name for our community. What are we? A bunch of feckers? May not sound right. If you have an idea, leave it in the comments below. But for now, I'm just going to call you our friends. So our friends in the community is the key to the success of this podcast. The reason I do it, and I know the reason people are listening, is because they want to support people that's going through a hard time from where they are to where they want to get to, whether that's financial, mental health, whether it's fitness, whatever the case is, but they're saying, feck it, no more, things must change in my life. So with that said, again, thank you all, and let's get into today's show. I want to start with a few stats, because I think it's important to know the numbers on how many people it's affecting out there. Because I know whenever I was going through anxiety, and this is long before the word was even commonly talked about, probably about 45 years ago, people told me I was shy, people told me I was a worrier. Looking back on it now, I definitely had anxiety. And the reasons I thought I had an anxiety at that time, well, I wasn't thinking about it, but as I got older in life, I was like, that was the reason I had anxiety. I was going through some hard times in the family at that stage, where there was a lot of arguments and that in my house. One of my parents was a very heavy drinker, so there was a lot of arguments and discussions. So I was always listening out for things. I was always trying to be observant. I was always understanding what sort of mood the house was going to be in, which all very common signs of anxiety. But I also know that it doesn't have to be that stress level for anxiety. I don't know if some people are just more prone to it or not, because years later, myself and my wife worked very hard not to create an environment where our kids could be anxious, and certainly a couple of our kids have suffered with anxiety over the years. So for me, I don't think it's just about the outside environment. It definitely doesn't help, and we'll talk more about that soon. I think it's certainly more about the environment that we create in our own head. So let's get into some of the numbers and see how it's currently affecting people out there. So about 17% of Australians, that's 3.4 million people last year, suffered from some form of an anxiety disorder last year. Recent data from Headspace, who do awesome work with young children from the ages of 12 to 25, reported that over 49% of children in that age group were suffering or feeling high or very high levels of distress. Women are more likely to feel anxiety, 21% compared to 13% of men. But I think one of the most scary statistics that I came across in this research was 1 in 10 children aged between 3 and 17 are diagnosed with anxiety. And that jumps up to 26% for teens reporting ongoing anxiety symptoms. So I really can't stress enough, if you're out there and you're listening to that, regardless of the age bracket, regardless of what sex you are, there's a lot of people suffering and going through exactly what you're going through at the moment. So first and foremost is to understand it is a normal part of today's society. And what I didn't come across was a stat of how many people totally recover from it and go on to lead an amazing life. And I suppose that's a perspective that I can very much give. Now, I'm still an overthinker. I still would have worrying tendencies if I hadn't have done so much work on myself mentally to overcome them. Now it has to be something very major in order for me to even consider worrying about it. But that's because I have done so much work internally and I had to stumble my way through it. So we're going to talk today about some things that work for me, but more importantly, what the research and the studies out there are actually showing as well. Just going back to the kids between 3 and 17 as diagnosed. A very good friend of mine, we were having a discussion the other day, and he had said that his 7-year-old was currently struggling with it. And it was something I identified with because looking back, my son definitely struggled with it. And as parents, we maybe didn't have the tools to cope with that at that time. So I think if you have a child that's currently going through it, that can be a very worrying time for everybody. I know it certainly was for my friend. But being able to look at, okay, what can I do and what can I control in this situation versus what can I not do or what should I not do, I think is also an important step. So I suppose let's just jump into a little bit about how our brain works and how we have developed over the last 50,000 years. Our ancestors back in the caveman day had to be very much aware of every threat that there was out there. What have we got? We had animals trying to eat them, so lions, tigers, trying to hunt them down, eat them. We had weather elements living out bush, out in caves, so we had to worry about that threat. We had to worry about hunting, catching our food, making sure we could eat. So our brains were developed in a way where we were in a heightened state. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of the amygdala, but it's pretty much the little part of the brain that says, is it a fight or flight? You might have heard it as. Those high levels of stress, it dumps cortisol. And we have had that built into us, as I said, for a lifetime. Now, fast forward to present day, that function is still in our brain, but it's just lowered the parameters now at this stage. We're not so much worried about getting eaten by a tiger. We're not so much worried about going hungry, and there is a lot of people that are. We're not so much worried about the elements because, again, majority of us are in houses. So we've had to find new ways of our brains coming up with them stress levels. So they have lowered the bar a little bit, is what research is saying. And it's saying that as a result of that, the like of the small things, the like of the Wi-Fi not working, being cut off by somebody in a car, being late for a bus, being late for work. But those smaller things that really stress us out nowadays are everywhere and they've become a lot more common. So social media, the news, currently everything's about the war, death, destruction. People use that drama to catch our attentions and to hold our attention. So much marketing out there, there's so much media going on. So we're constantly tuned into that smaller stresses, and that is where a lot of the anxiety coming. Now, I'm not saying for somebody that's currently getting bullied online is a small stress by any stretch of the imagination. To the brain, it feels the exact same as getting chased by a pack of lions. We feel like we're getting attacked. We feel like people are ruining our lives. So I'm not diminishing it by any stretch of the imagination, but what we've done is we've replaced one threat with lots and lots of other threats, if that makes sense. So we have went from only a few things that we were stressed about to now hundreds of things that we can be stressed about. So why is our kids in particular getting younger and younger with these stresses as well? Because there's no filters, or there's very few filters on what kids can hear and see today. I suppose news came on whenever I was young, maybe once or twice a day, that I got to see. Whereas now, with the internet, with social media, we've got flashing in our face all the time. So that is certainly one reason. If I was getting bullied at school for having sticky out ears, I always give as good as I got. But if a child was getting bullied at school back in my day, they went home, there was that safety where they hadn't to face it to the next day. So they were getting a break, cortisol levels, everything was lowering. Whereas now they go home, they're online, they can see everybody still online, they still have comments coming in, or even worse, no likes, no friends, and they still feel that impact. So it's on 24/7 versus 8 hours a day. So I often talk about how every experience we have from the ages of about 2 to 3, whenever our brains are really starting to develop, and right through up until late teens, early 20s, we're just sponges and we're taking in information. And again, before technology, that was what our friends were doing, what our family was doing, what people around us was saying. That was the information we were taking in. Whereas now, because of the digital impact, we're taking in lots of different forms of information. So our brains are now rewiring to that learning from apps and from technology as well, which, while it has its very much good and strong points, there has to be having some sort of negative impact as well, which is what the research has shown. But the way we learn that information, the way we rewire and wire our brains is changing from the past to keep up with technology. There's also a lot of stress and a lot of pressure put on kids from the high-performing parent who really now wants their kids to go on and succeed. And that's something that's always been there. So that continues to be one of the reasons where we push our kids. And you know what? I've maybe been guilty of this in the past as well. And hey, look, you know, you're now 18. What do you want to do with the rest of your life? What do you want to go and achieve? And to be honest, I tried to back off and think about it a lot more, because I realized at 18, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I thought I wanted to be a bricklayer. I did that for a few years, and then I figured out I don't want to do that. I want to do something different. And then after that, it was something different. So for me, I think as parents, sometimes we can put a lot of additional pressure on certainly late teens from kind of 15, 16. And even now you see it go to any kind of kids football or kids basketball or kids games where you've got so many competitive parents on the sidelines pushing their kids on. So that definitely comes with its added stress and anxiety levels. And we also know that kids are like sponges. So there is a real issue with the amount of adults that are out there stressed, under pressure, worried about things, living with anxiety. And their kids can pick up on that very, very quickly, unintentionally, subconsciously, because they've got little brains that are just taking in so much information. I actually listened to a podcast the other day about meditation, and that can be a positive thing and that can be a good thing. That research was showing that parents that do meditation and that are calmer and more relaxed, that the kids also pick up on that and take that on as sponges. So if you're out there and you're listening and you're an adult with kids and you are an anxious person and it's something you haven't really got control of and you haven't really overcome, I would really encourage you to do a deep dive into, okay, how can I overcome this anxiety? Because it's not just impacting my life. There's a good chance it'll be rubbing off on my young kids as well. And I suppose the next point I want to talk about also is going to lead into what the research shows about how we can overcome anxiety. Years ago, kids very much went outside, they played. That was it. I remember getting told to get out of the house at a young age, go out and play, and you didn't have to come back until street lights come on, till it was dark. Come in and out for food, of course. These days, because our world got so unsafe, people were worried about their kids playing outside, getting abducted, things happening to them. That very much changed. And now a lot of our kids' playtime is inside, it's digital, it's online. There was also the element of risk. We used to climb trees. We used to do jumps on bikes. We used to do things that elevated our risk, which helped us to manage our fear. We kind of had to overcome it to a certain extent. And I can certainly remember times in my life where I'm sitting there thinking, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. Now, whenever it came to physical things, chance of hurting myself and breaking myself, it didn't really matter. It didn't stop me. I broke more things as a child than I care to remember. However, whenever it came to the mental stuff about going to talk to people, about being in groups with other people, that's where my anxiety levels went sky high and I couldn't do nothing about it. So whenever the reports say that kids in the old days were certainly learning to manage fear, I would say that was an aspect of their life as well. We also take away the amount of vitamin D that we're getting. And the physical energy that we would have been doing outside, we're also burning off a lot of the stress chemicals within the body as well, which if we're sitting in online, watching TV, doing things like that, without the movement, we're not getting that chemical burn off happening. So that moves us in very nicely into some of the things that we can do to overcome anxiety, the way we can get on top of it, the way we can beat it, whatever terminology that works for you. For in my head, if I'm suffering with anxiety, which I have, but if I'm listening and somebody's out there and they're thinking, okay, what can I do, Glenn? You're right. I'm anxious about everything. I'm worried. I'm stressed about everything. How do I overcome that first and foremost? And I've heard people say, I can't do anything about it. I can't fix it. I can't overcome it. And one option is certainly, talk to your doctor, talk to somebody about it. There is lots of meds out there that will help people with anxiety and give them a head start. Now, me personally, I don't really do meds too much. I try to avoid them. So I look for more natural, and that's what we're going to talk about in this podcast. Absolutely nothing wrong with going to the doctor, seeking meds and getting help. The big thing I would want to stress to people is that don't just think I want to manage my anxiety, because we're setting the bar very low. I don't want to manage my anxiety. I want to be able to overcome it. I want to be able to beat it. I want to be able to put it in the past. Words like that, we know from NLP practices, are stronger, more powerful, give you a chance of totally overcoming it and leaving it in the past. So the way you think about your anxiety is very important. If you normalize it, which is what we've tried to do by showing there's so many people out there suffering with it, if we can normalize it first and foremost to say, hey, look, this isn't unusual. Other people are doing it. If we can also show that lots of other people have overcome anxiety, and I'm sure once we start talking about it more, we understand that people that used to have it no longer really suffer with it due to the work that they've maybe done on themselves, or maybe it's the medication they're taking. But there is certainly a real strong reason why you should say, I am going to beat anxiety versus I want to be able to manage my anxiety. Hopefully you can hear the difference out there. One will give you a greater chance of putting this behind you quickly. The other one gives you a chance that you'll manage it for the rest of your life. So with that said, I just want to go back to the kids playing outside point, and this works for adults as well. So there's one study out there, and it's looked at over 1.2 million people, and it found that people that exercised had 43% fewer poor mental health days than those that didn't. That's a lot. That's nearly half from exercising. It also goes on to say for people with mid to moderate anxiety levels, that 150 minutes of exercise in a week, which includes like light walking, cycling, swimming, something along those lines where it's movement and it's outside, that it worked as well as any medicine or any therapy. And why does it help? So they have actually shown that the exercises help repair and grow the parts of the brain that anxiety wears down. As we mentioned earlier, when you're anxious, your body is in that fight or flight mode, and it floods your body with cortisol and a few other chemicals that really prepare you for that flight or that fight situation. The problem is there's no tiger, and if there's no movement, then chemicals that are harmful are in your blood and have nowhere to go. So sitting there makes you feel shaky and panicky. And as we mentioned, the way to fix this or overcome this is by movement. So when you move, your muscle uses up that stored energy and tells your nervous system, hey, the fight is over. We survived. Switch off the alarm, which stops the dumping the cortisols into the bloodstream. So with that information, you now know that movement is your friend whenever it comes to stress. And I'm not talking about having to do CrossFit until you puke. Feel free to do that. It's fun. I'm talking you can break it down to as little as 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, to really help improve your mental health. If you're saying, Glenn, I don't have 30 minutes a day, chunk it down into 10-minute snacks. 10 in the morning, 10 in the evening, 10 at lunchtime, or get 15 minutes a day. But I would challenge people to go, I can't get 30 minutes a day to improve my mental health. I would really question that. I would say something else you can do while you're moving as well. Now, we're lucky here in Australia. We get to go for a lovely bushwalk. We get to be able to walk to the coast. We'll be able to do lots of things. There's ovals and green places that we can get out into. And we'll talk more a little bit about how the environment can really help as well. So I want you to imagine that your anxiety is a bit like a high-performing car full of energy, waiting to go, and you're revving the pedal, but you're not going anywhere. You're still in neutral. Sooner or later, you're going to damage that engine if you're not moving and burning off that energy. Of course, if you have any health concerns, please make sure you go check with your doctor first and put a plan in place. So we talked about when you feel stressed, that flight or fight kicks in. The brain starts dumping cortisol into your bloodstream. One of the things that the studies and the research shows that really help fight against them chemicals getting into your bloodstream is magnesium. So magnesium has been shown to help lower stress levels. So it might be a thing that you want to check. Do I take enough magnesium? Do I need a supplement? But again, I would check with your doctors on that. It is something that the research has shown, and it's something I wanted to mention. if you want to try and get that magnesium in naturally, the like of pumpkin seeds really help, leafy greens, dark chocolate. Also, swim in the ocean or being able to bath in Epsom salts or something along that lines really helps the body absorb that extra magnesium also. There is a couple of different types of magnesium out there, so you want to check to make sure you're getting the right one. One makes you poop easier. The other one helps fight with stress. Now, I believe it's magnesium glycinate that helps you with the stress levels. I will put that in the show notes to this episode. So another study, different one totally, shows that 20 minutes in nature is another great way to overcome anxiety. And this wasn't just about asking people to sit outside in nature and observe how they felt. They were able to measure the change within these people. So the researchers asked people to spend up to 3 times a week for 8 weeks in nature. They measured the stress chemicals in their body beforehand and also then afterwards. And the magic number they came up with was between 20 and 30 minutes was whenever the stress dropped the fastest. And here's the crazy thing. It didn't matter whether you were walking in nature or just sitting in nature. So I know we just mentioned in the previous study that the movement really helped. If you're not somebody who loves movement, just sitting in nature can have these positive effects too. And if you think about it, why would that be? Because we spent so much time and our ancestors spent so much time in nature in the past, our brains are hardwired to want to see that horizon, to see them hills, to see the trees, to be in nature. I know whenever I come back from a trail run or being out in a trail for a few hours compared to sitting in an office all day long, I feel mentally stronger, mentally more relaxed, in a happier place. So, and again, what that looks like for you is going to be slightly different. Here, we can get out, like I mentioned before, go to the beach, go to the trails, go to a park. Now, you might be living in somewhere with colder conditions. I lived in Ireland for a long part of my life, but I could still get out in nature. And even whenever I was out in colder, wetter, shittier conditions, I still felt better than whenever I was sitting in the house. Now, I would really recommend if you are out sitting in nature, you try to have it so that it's not connected to the technology, so that you don't have your phone in your hand for the 20 minutes that you're out there, because that might take away from taking in everything that's around the nature. So phone at the bottom of the bag, left in the car, whatever you can do, but try to give yourself that disconnect from technology and reconnect to your environment. And if you're stuck in a city or you work in an office, being able to try and get little 5-minute micro breaks where you can go, you can look out a window, you can go for a little short walk, will also give you them benefits as well. But you need to stack them on top of each other and do them regularly. There's also a lot of research on how sunlight and vitamin D can really help improve our moods as well, and also the physical things within our body, but that's certainly for another podcast as well. So those are a few of the movements, getting out into nature, being able to top up our magnesium. There are things that we can do externally, that we can get up, we can go out, we can do them, or we can take something to help improve it. And other vitamins will certainly help, but as I said, check with your doctor to make sure that's okay for the movement side of things, and also for whether you're taking any form of medication or vitamins. But there is another aspect, and this one is certainly where people that maybe go to the like a therapy really get some benefits from. I'm not saying you have to go and see a therapist. I'm not even saying that you have to go and see a life coach or somebody like that. Not in the slightest. But there is really good evidence that people that look internally can really help themselves whenever it comes to overcoming their anxiety. And what I would recommend, which is something I recommend to everybody I work with, is that if we have a challenge in our lives and we're currently here, but we want to get to somewhere else, or in this instance, if we've had a Feck it no more moment, I'm done with anxiety, it's over, I really want to beat this and put it in my past, to where I want to get to is a life with no anxiety, where I'm feeling better and I'm in total control of my mental health, then I need to know what's the gap. What's the tools that are going to help me get from where I am to where I want to go? Now, some things that have worked for me and other people, we're going to talk about now. There's a tool called Reframing, and that is a very powerful tool. And if you think about it, I don't have a glass of water, but imagine you have a glass of water, glass half empty, glass half full. One's a negative mindset, one's a positive mindset. Negative mindset might be, my glass is half empty. I'm going to run out of water. Holy shit, I might die. That's the negative mindset. Glass is half full. I've got lots of water. It'll keep me going for now. I can also get up and get more water. Life is good. Life is rosy. The exact same glass, just different perspectives. So the reframing tool, and you've maybe heard me talk about this before on it, is a very good way to overcome the thoughts that lead to the anxiety. So for everything that we think about, there is two forms. There's the negative and there's the positive. So I suppose putting myself back into my shoes whenever I definitely had worries about talking to people or being able to go and hold a conversation or being able to go and play with the other kids, 5 to 10 to 15 age group, being able to interact with people. That was certainly where a lot of my anxiety, I certainly wasn't called that back then, but now that's what it was. That's where mine come from. So if instead of me telling myself, what if they know that there's things going on in my house? What if they know that I'm not that clever and I can't read and write? What if they don't like me? What if they don't get along with me? What if they call me names? What if they bully me? That type of mindset. If I had have thought, okay, that's one perspective. What if I shifted to, what if they do like me? What if I do enjoy playing with them? How much fun would I have? Okay, maybe not all of them will like me and that's okay, but what if I make one or two really good friends out of it? So changing that perspective from the negative lens to the positive lens, a more positive frame, is a really powerful tool for anxiety. Maybe you're an adult, maybe it's something to do with work, maybe you're stressed, trying to find the positive in it. And the positive might be, what if I just leave this job and go and get a different job? So there's always a positive and a negative way to look at things, but that's a skill. That's something you learn. That's something you develop. And you don't go from that right now, thinking in more of a negative, stressed mindset, to a positive overnight. Is something you're going to have to be mindful of. What it looked like for me was, whenever I first heard about it, I couldn't unhear it. So I knew that it was there, but my habits and my behaviors of always thinking in a negative mindset were still stuck there. So I would hear something in my head and I would go, no, that's actually that negative frame that they were talking about. How do I get it to a positive frame? What's more positive? And yeah, I learned it. I had to develop it over the years. So that reframing is a real positive tool to use. Then a few other tools that are directly linked to the like of NLP. For people that want to overcome certain areas, there's a couple of different techniques that people can do. You can go and see an NLP practicer, or certainly do the research into it yourself and try these tools on yourself. But there's one called a Swish pattern, which is basically pull up the image in your mind of what that thing that you're worrying about is. And as I say, it's usually a certain aspect of life or a few certain aspects of life, not all of them. But you pull that up and you replace it with a better image and you kind of smash them together and the more positive image is there. That's a technique that can be done, which really helps people to change that perspective in their mind. There's also the like of the circle of excellence, or anchoring as it's called. So you're picking that state where you did feel confident, or the opposite to anxious. If we think, what's the opposite to anxious, which is, I don't know, excited, confidence, leave some comments in the comments below. What is the opposite to anxious? Stress. It would be excited. It would be confident, I'm guessing. It would be enjoyment. There would be better emotions and better feeling that you would want to feel than stressed. So you replace them. And for somebody that's living in the negative emotions for so long, having them positive ones can feel really hard to attain. They're not the default settings, put it that way. So learning how to get them as a default setting, as I say, the anchoring tool, which is where you would anchor a time where you did feel it in the past to a movement, a thought, a smell, a sound, something along them lines. But then there's also a visualization version of that where you can do, where you imagine once you step into this golden circle that you automatically feel this way. So there's a few different techniques around that anchoring golden circle that are done in NLP, depending on the person that's actually doing the practice with you. So there's also, if you've got that inner voice in your head that's telling you you're not good enough, or you're stressed, it's telling you that you're not good enough, that this is going to happen, that's going to end your life, that this is going to be really bad. If there's that negative inner voice in your head that's leading to that stress, there's also a technique that you can do where you change what that little voice sounds like. You can sit back, you can imagine that whatever you're currently hearing is totally the opposite. So maybe you're hearing it as like a cartoon character, Donald Duck, Mickey Mouse, talking in a really high-pitched voice, really squeaky, so you make that voice funny. So every time you hear that little voice in your head, you've went from that old negative voice to something that's quite hilarious, makes you laugh and think, ha ha ha. So you're already devaluing the way you used to think about things compared to the way you now think about things because you're hearing it in a different internal voice in your head. So that's another NLP technique that you can do, which is sometimes called volume controlled, or there's lots of other titles out there. So there are a few of the actual patterns that can work internally. So if somebody was asking me again, okay, just give me a recap of the things that I can do for myself to overcome, to beat, to totally annihilate this anxiety, that I never have to suffer with this again in my life. And first and foremost, you have to believe that that's the case. I know that I don't suffer with anxiety anymore. I know I used to. I didn't know it at the time, but I know now. I also know that lots of other people no longer suffer with it because I've talked to them. I've helped a lot of people get through that phase as well. So it is a case of you saying, okay, I know I can beat this. I know I can overcome this. Other people have done it. I can do it too. Where do I start? I would definitely start looking at where can you get more exercise in? Where can you get that movement in? Where can I get out into nature a little bit more? So I would start with them two big ones straight away. That takes no other effort than just getting up and actually doing it and going out and sitting in nature, going out and doing the walk, swimming, whatever activity you enjoy doing. Then I would also have a look at, okay, my internal thought processes. What can I actually do to change that? I would start getting curious about what does my anxiety sound like whenever I have it in my head. Or maybe it's not a sound for me, maybe it's a picture. I start thinking ahead what the future looks like and I can see these images. What is that looking like in my head? So I would get very curious about internally, where's it coming from? What's the reason I'm feeling this? Once that curiosity is there, you can start tweaking and you can start changing things. But then, as I said, if you're really still not getting the progress that you would like there, I would reach out to somebody. I would go and chat to a doctor or a therapist or a life coach or an NLP practitioner. There's lots of people you can talk to. I would even go as far as saying, if you're out there, you want help, you want support, give us a shout on the Feck It No More podcast. I will work with an individual to help them through the process, as long as you're happy to give it shared anonymously or your real name so that other people can get that benefit from it too, which is the goal of us. But just getting curious about, okay, how do I improve my life and how do I get to a better place from this moment on? So just before we wrap up, if you want to think of anxiety as an overprotective bodyguard, it's trying to keep you safe. It's trying to not let things hurt you. But if you can get to the point where you can say, hey, look, it's okay. I'm in control of my life. I've got it. Thanks for your help. Thanks for everything you've done for me. However, I no longer need your services, anxiety, and I'm going to take control of things from moving forward. As always, I hope you've got something from this episode. If you have, please leave a comment in our comments below. Support our community. Get behind us. Let us know what you thought of our last episode where Suki had come on board and shared his story about his struggle being able to connect and make relationships because of his past. Let us know what you're enjoying on the content and what you would maybe like to see in future episodes. Also, please consider getting involved. So you can get involved by sharing our content, liking our content, or being brave that if there's an area of your life that you've had and you've said, feck it no more, tell us about it. Let us share your moment with other people. If you're still going through it, let us help you through that process. And thanks for watching. And now for the legal stuff. As I've said many times before, I am not a mental health professional. I am somebody that has went through a journey of self-development over the last 20 years, who has done the research, who has put in the work to improve his life from where it was to where it now is. And for the last 5 years, I've been working with clients as a results coach, which I'm certified to do, to help them get from where they are to a better place in all aspects of their life. Thanks for watching.